Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Conlin, and welcome to Pop Crime TV's The Outlier podcast. This is your Diddy recap of Week 3, the United States versus Sean Combs, his federal trial in New York City. And my recap, the podcast this week, is a little bit different. So, before the last two episodes, I was taking a lot of time to script an episode out. And I mean, I just kind of think that I need a break from Diddy over the weekend. I think it's just kind of getting to me a little bit, the darkness, and I don't know, just going through all of the notes in detail like that to write a script. I was like, oh, this is probably not great for me. And again, it was taking a really long time. So, because I am covering this case for other outlets besides my own, I'm actually covering for Nancy Grace. So I'm not sure if I mentioned that. So yeah, if you want to watch Nancy Grace daily, you can find some of my reports there. And also, I am doing reports for Crime Junkie's new YouTube channel, Crime Junkie Jury. And that channel is awesome. Right now, they have Brandy Churchwell. She's amazing. She is streaming the Karen Reed trial, and they're playing the updates that I do. We call it the Daily Diddy Digest during the Karen Reed lunch break. And then there's also a separate playlist for the Daily Diddy Digest. So I'm doing basically each day for them, for Crime Junkie. So what I did was I ripped the audio from those videos, and I'm going to be playing them for you one after another. So the first video, you're going to hear day 10, Capricorn Clark's testimony. I'm going to talk about that. And I didn't announce that it was day 10 in the first update because I had to go through and do some other updates before that. But after that, you'll hear a little intro that it's day 11, day 12, day 13. So it should be pretty clear and really not much different from the podcast I was doing. However, these updates are unscripted, so you'll hear me say just some filler words and maybe some pauses, but hopefully you won't mind and you'll still get the same idea here. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to play these updates, and then after I will close us out. Okay, so let's go to Capricorn Clark today. Capricorn Clark, she was Diddy's assistant from 2004 to 2006. And I want to make sure that this is not super confusing because she started working for him in 2004. Her official employment ended in 2018, but she left a few times in between. So I'll go through that. So Capricorn Clark started off as an assistant in 2004, and then she became a Sean John brand manager. And then after that, she became a Sean Combs global brand manager, where she was in charge of his name and his likeness. And then she also was in charge of, as I mentioned, Cassie's brand and image. Now, she moved to New York, she said, in 2001. Both of her parents died when she was in high school, and she met Diddy actually through a friend, and she called him Puff, her friend Jeanette. They actually used to party together, and they were all really friendly. I mean, we saw emails later in the day where they called themselves, like, I think it was like JCS or something, like Jeanette, Sean, Capricorn, because they had this little group where they were all hanging out. But some of the big moments today. Well, she testified that the first night or the first day that she was employed, she said that Diddy and a bodyguard took her to Central Park after 9 p.m, and he made a threat to her. Now, she testified that one of her best friends has kids with Suge Knight. And she worked, or she interned in the music industry in LA. And I think that's how this whole connection came about with Suge and her friend and whatever. But anyway, she said that on her first night of employment, Diddy said to her, he said, if anything happens with Suge, I'd have to kill you, or something along those lines. And the defense kind of clarified, he didn't just take her into Central Park. I guess they had parked at Tavern on the Green. They didn't eat there, but Central Park seems to be a place where Diddy goes frequently for walks, and they even were there earlier that day. So they were trying to sort of mitigate this, dark, elusive threat that she spoke about. She testified that, I thought this was interesting. She testified that during a press event, at an MTV press event, and she didn't say the date, but at the time, this music manager, Chris Lighty, he managed 50 Cent and Diddy. And she said that 50 Cent had a problem, or I'm sorry, Diddy had a problem with 50 Cent, and they were in the elevator. And this was not 50 Cent. It was Chris Lighty, Capricorn, Diddy, and Diddy said to Chris Lighty, he said, I don't like the back and forth, meaning with 50 Cent. He said, I don't like the back and forth. I like guns. Oh, okay. So that was a moment. And I think I was just more interested in that because 50 Cent trolls Diddy nonstop. And I was like, okay, so there is some beef on Diddy's end, even though he's denied it in the past. Now, Capricorn talked about how in 2004, her first year of employment, she was accused of stealing some jewelry that was loaned to Diddy by Jacob the jeweler. And she was traveling when this happened, and she tells Diddy and security, it's missing. And they say, okay, go back to New York. We will handle this. And she said, you better search everyone, call them, search them, whatever, whoever was around this jewelry. Well, then she talks about something very traumatic that happened to her, where she was picked up by one of Diddy's security guards, Uncle Paulie, and she was taken to a building, this like very abandoned building. And it was in Manhattan. And it actually, I believe it turned out to be one of their offices later on. But at the time, it was dilapidated. He took her up to the 6th floor. She talked about how the door locked on the outside. So she was locked in. And there was this table and just like 2 chairs. And she described a man sitting there that was 5 times her size, chain smoking. And she said that he told her if she didn't pass the polygraph test, she was going to be thrown into the East River. The East River in Manhattan, it's I mean, not that it matters, but it's so gross. It is disgusting, and it's scary. So she said that she was there. I mean, she went home at the end of the day, but she had to be there taking this polygraph test 5 days in a row, all day. So, and she didn't pass at first, or it was inconclusive because she was so nervous. And they said to her, you better pass this or you're going to be thrown into the East River. So that was traumatic for her. And the defense kind of, when they got up there, they were just like, okay, but you told everybody that, or you told Diddy and his team that everybody should be searched and everybody should be investigated. So just want to point that out. So she also, she talked about how she worked from 7 a.m. to 4 a.m. some days, and she was exhausted, and she developed alopecia from the stress of, her grueling schedule. She also said that she was only making $65,000, and that at one point she went to HR about this, and they calculated some overtime for her, which totaled up to $80,000. And I guess they had this in a sheet of paper or something for Diddy. They handed it to him, HR, and Capricorn Clark said she watched him rip it up, and she never got that money. She also talked about cleaning up after freak-offs. She said that she would book hotels in 2004 at this time for Diddy and Kim Porter a lot. So many of us were wondering, okay, so is Kim Porter, or was she doing these FOs? Because she testified, Capricorn Clark, that she had the baby oil in the room, the candles that she would set things up with, and she would clean up. She said baby oil off the wall, off of the floors. She said there'd be handprints on the walls with baby oil. She talked about the Louis Vuitton med bag that we heard so much about multiple times, just more corroboration. Let me see. Now, okay, so I'm looking at this. Okay, so there was another incident, and this was the first time that she left the company, and she left and she got fired. And there is a lot of back and forth about this. It was slightly confusing, but this was let me see. This was actually in 2006. She testified that he asked her to get I don't know if I can say it on YouTube. Yes, that cocaine for somebody, and she said no. And then she testified about getting prescription drugs for him. And then she testified about an occurrence. And sorry, I'm going back to where she talked about how she left the company at one point. And this was after an incident in Miami where she said that the chef, she said something like, "I hate it here," in the kitchen. And the chef told Diddy, and he physically like shoved her shoulders. She said he used about 70% of his force, shoved her out of his house and is like, "Get the F out, get the F out." That's around 2006. And then she came back in 2007 as a brand manager for Sean John. So, they talked about why she returned. The defense was like, "So you were treated like this, but you returned." And she kept saying, "It's complicated." And she cried a lot on the stand. I felt for her. It was very emotional. So that was another moment. Okay, then she talked about when she was working with Cassie, the whole Kid Cudi thing. She was the one that got Cassie to get a burner phone to talk to Kid Cudi because she's like, "Listen, Cassie, like he pays for everything. He pays for our phones, and he's going to see this. So don't text me about Kid Cudi." And also, Capricorn Clark said that he paid for her apartment, her car, her phone. He paid for everything in her life. So she testified that when Diddy found out that he came to her apartment, she said between 5:30 and 6 a.m., he knocked, he was like pounding on her door, not knocking, but she looked through a peephole and she saw him with a gun. She said she felt like she had no choice but to let him in. And he basically said to her, "Get up, get dressed. We're going to go kill this guy." And he used another word. And he was talking about Kid Cudi. She said she was terrified. When the defense got up to cross-examine her, they were kind of just like, "So, who let him in?" And she talked about how a security guard let him in. The security guard has been fired. And she said she doesn't know his name, but they were kind of just trying to say, "Well, how did he get in? He didn't break into your house, whatever." But she talked about how they got to the car. She drove to Kid Cudi's house, and that's where she called Cassie on the burner phone, and Kid Cudi was on speaker. And she said that she told them, "Diddy's in your house and he has a gun." And she said that Kid Cudi said, "What? He's in my house?" And then according to Capricorn Clark, Diddy came out and she like hung up the phone and she changed the name in the phone to her friend Stormy. And he's like, who are you on the phone with?" And she's like, "My friend." And he grabbed it. He called it back. He found it was Cassie, and he was even angrier than he was before. This is her testimony. And then she said at that point, they all get back in the car and they see Kid Cudi's Porsche coming up. And we had never heard this before, but according to her, he pulls up and then he speeds away and they chase him up a hill. And then eventually they lose him. But then she testified that Diddy threatened she and Cassie and said, "Look, it was later that night. If you guys don't get him to not tell the police," he said, I will kill you both." And so they tried to convince him, I guess, not to tell the police. Now, we have not heard yet from anyone from the LAPD just yet. But she also talked about Capricorn Clark, how she got a call later that summer, the summer of 2012. And again, if you recall, this whole incident happened in 2011, in December of 2011. She was fired in March of 2012. And this was because she said because of a vacation that she told Harv Pierre about. And, they said, "Oh yeah, you didn't tell us you were going on vacation." And she kind of knew like they were done with her. They wanted her gone after this, according to her. But anyway, that summer, she said she got a call from someone working arson in LAPD. And she said she hung up on them. She's like, "I didn't want anything to do with any of this anymore." But she also testified that she didn't know anything about an arson, aka the Molotov cocktail. Now let's go back to the driveway when she made this call to Cassie and Kid Cudi. During the cross-examination, there was a really big moment because Mark Agnifilo said, "So when you called Cassie on the burner, you weren't on a three-way call with Lauren London, were you?" And she's like, "What? No, absolutely not." And he's like, "Are you sure?" And she's like, "Yes, I'm sure." And for many of us, we're very shocked because we've heard this story multiple times about the break-in, but we haven't heard Lauren London's name dropped in any of this. Well, then she says, Capricorn Clark says, "Well, I called her first before I called Cassie and Kid Cudi. And then the defense was like, well, wait, your whole thing was you were so worried, because she said this, I was so worried that Kid Cudi was in the house that I didn't know what Diddy would do. So they were like, so you called Lauren London first? And she's like, yeah, well, just, to cover my own butt, for her to say where I was, because I was scared. And then she's like, out of the blue, she goes, well, I guess Lauren could have been on the phone when I called Cassie. There's the possibility, which was much different than anything that we had heard up until then, because she was so adamant about her not being on the call. So that was interesting. There was also another event she mentioned, just I think that corroborates the grooming of Cassie. She actually said Lauren London and Capricorn, they were in the kitchen with Diddy. And he said, why you guys don't have a man? And they're like, why? And then he called Cassie in and he's like, walk over here, walk over there, pick that up and give it to me. And now leave. And she did. And they're like, and he said, because you won't do that. And they're like, yeah, you damn right we won't. So yeah, we heard Lauren London's names twice today. So yes. Okay. So then, so she leaves in 2012 and then she returns again in 2016. And this is Capricorn Clark. But what we heard a lot from the defense, and just to go back to the government, again, the control with Cassie, she witnessed the control. She witnessed, just how abusive he was. I guess she witnessed him kick Cassie after the Kid Cudi incident. And when she told us that, I felt like it was very emotional. She just talked about how he kept kicking her and kicking her and kicking her. And he said to Capricorn, like, if you jump in, you're going to get effed up too. So Capricorn said that she left and she ended up calling Cassie's mother. And she just said, I'm over my head. I can't do anything about this, but he is beating the crap out of your daughter and you can do something about it. And so Cassie's mom said, okay, so basically in 2016, she returns to focus on Cassie. And the defense elicited testimony from Capricorn saying that she didn't think Cassie was very talented. And then she kind of clarifies, well, Whitney Houston is talented. And she kind of said that Cassie, she changed a lot. She had a sweet demeanor when she was a model. And then, she kind of became a little bit different as Sean Combs' girlfriend. And she testified that Cassie, like I said, a lot of bad boy artists got a lot less attention than Cassie, or a lot less resources than Cassie did. And let me see. She testified that Cassie basically, because Cassie told Diddy to hire Capricorn Clark back, that's why he did it. And she had been kind of emailing him and trying to get back into his good graces, during that time. And she cried on the stand saying that it hurt her during cross-examination that Diddy only hired her back because Cassie told him to. So then the defense elicited a very random meeting that they got her to talk about that they had with her. And I mean, like, Mark Agnifilo and Tenny Garagos had a meeting with Capricorn Clark in April of 2024. When I was writing that down, I was like, did I say that right? That's crazy. So they met with her in April of 2024 and they talked about, I guess, her coming back to work as chief of staff, or she brought it up. And they're like, yeah, just so you know, he's under criminal investigation. That probably wouldn't work. And the defense said, do you remember saying that if I was still here, this wouldn't have happened? And she's like, no, I don't remember. They also said that her attorney was present, Brian Friedman, which many of you will know that he currently represents Justin Baldoni. Yeah. And then the defense just got testimony out of Capricorn saying that her relationship with Diddy was complicated. She felt like his protector a lot of the times. And yeah, she cried a lot. And he was very stoic. He didn't seem to move. He didn't seem to he passed some notes to Mark Agnifilo during this time, during his cross. But let me see. I think I've covered most of Capricorn. They did try to poke some holes. They said, oh, you said Lauren London was here, but are you sure you didn't tell the government it was Lorianne Gibson? She's a choreographer. And Capricorn's like, nope, that must have been a mistake. a lot of the time they've been doing this. They've been handing the transcripts of the government interviews that the witnesses have done, and a lot of the testimony is different, and they're trying to call them out on it. They also pointed out that, she seemed to be business as usual, sending emails and whatnot a week or two after the kidnapping and Kid Cudi. And yeah, I think I got the biggest things of the day, I want to say. Yeah, and then I'd say overall, I mean, the jury, I just want to point out, they've been super stoic. It's been really hard to read them a lot of the time. Last week, it was a lot. And I did see some of them kind of falling asleep in the middle row when the HSI employee was testifying, and also Dr. Don Hughes. A lot of that testimony can be a little bit mundane. Today, though, during Capricorn Clark's testimony about the kidnapping and the Kid Cudi thing, they were writing things down. They were like paying really close attention. I was wow. Like I just felt like they were engaged, and I haven't seen them super engaged, just kind of, again, stoic. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for day 10. What we're going to see this week, we're going to hear from an LAPD officer. We're also going to hear from someone from the LA Fire Department. I believe this is going to be in connection to Kid Cudi. And then we're also going to hear from a former assistant going by a pseudonym named Mia, because she is also an SA victim or survivor of Sean Combs, allegedly. So I believe we're going to hear from her tomorrow or on the 29th. So stay tuned for that. Everything that happened on day 11, week 3, inside the courtroom. And I should have just listed his charges officially on my first video. So I'll just point out that he is being charged with 2 counts of sex trafficking, 1 count of racketeering, and 2 charges of transportation to engage in prostitution. So today, big day, because the defense actually moved for a mistrial. They were denied, and I'll get to why later. But let's just start off with the first witness, and it was someone from the LAPD, a police officer named Christopher Ignacio, and he's a 16-year vet, and he was called to the scene of a possible breaking and entering in December of 2011, which we know was Kid Cudi. It was Kid Cudi's residence. So Ignacio testified that around 8:20 a.m., he was dispatched over to the Hollywood Hills for this possible breaking and entering, excuse me. So he said that he went there with his partner. The lights and the sirens were on just in case. They didn't know what to expect. So when they got there, he testified that he saw a black Cadillac SUV with tinted windows parked outside of the house. And when he pulled up, they kind of drove away. And then shortly after that, a black Porsche pulled up, and that was the homeowner, aka Kid Cudi or Scott Mescudi. So Officer Ignacio testified that he went inside the house with his partner. They met 2 other detectives there. He saw opened gifts from Chanel. He didn't say Chanel. He just said open gifts, watches, purses, which Kid Cudi said were from Chanel, and Christmas presents for his family. And they said that there was nothing missing for the homeowner. And, they searched around the house twice in the backyard, making sure everything was okay. And about 20 minutes later, he testified, Officer Ignacio, that he went outside and he saw the black Cadillac SUV again coming down the hill by the house. And he actually said that he memorized the license plate. And he told us this on the stand. He said the license plate without any type of hesitation at all. So then he said he got back to his squad car, looked it up on whatever database they have, and it was registered to Bad Boy Productions. And then, that was that. So then the cross-examination was done by Brian Steele, who many of you know was Young Thug's attorney during the YSL trial. Crazy. But he's got great pace. I have to say, we got through this very quickly, and he wanted to just point out a couple things, like, hey, this case didn't exactly stick out to you, this whole B&E thing, right? Like, you just you only know about this now because you had to testify. This was nothing, right? And it turns out the report he made, the Officer Ignacio, it was a trespassing report. It actually wasn't even a breaking and entering. So he asked Officer Ignacio, did you see at any point the black Porsche pull up next to the Cadillac Escalade? Because if you recall, Capricorn Clark, during her testimony, talked about this chase, this high-speed chase where Kid Cudi drove away and Diddy, they drove off after him and she was in the back seat, up the hill, down the hill until Kid Cudi lost them. So Brian Steele's like, did you ever see this, the Porsche pull up to the SUV? And he said, no. And he just said, yeah, no, I didn't see any of that. And he said, so you didn't see any type of cars chasing other cars? And he's like, nope, didn't see anything. So that was interesting. He also said, when you spoke to the homeowner about this possible B&E or this trespassing, did the homeowner mention that a gun was involved? And he said, no. And Steele said, well, that would be something that you would want to put in your report because it's important, right? And he said, yes. And then he just said, did he mention, the homeowner mention a kidnapping? No. Well, that would be something you put in your report. And he was doing that clearly because Capricorn Clark said that Diddy had a gun and she told this to Kid Cudi and Cassie on the phone, as well as saying that she was kidnapped. So Kid Cudi left those details out to the police officer. And that was pretty much the last thing that he wanted to point out was that he was dispatched, Officer Ignacio, at 8:20, and Capricorn Clark testified that this happened between 6 and 7 a.m. So he wanted to point out the time discrepancies, but that was that, pretty cut and dry. Then we got to the next witness for the government, arson investigator Lance Jimenez. And he's a 22-year vet at the LAFD. And an arson investigator, he said, is basically a detective for the fire department to look into how certain fires are started. And so he was called in January of 2012, which we know is when the Molotov cocktail was thrown into Kid Cudi's car. And so he talks about, showing up to the scene. And, he talked about how Kid Cudi's driveway was very long, and we saw a picture of it on the screen. And I was surprised. And I was also surprised at how close the Porsche was to the garage. And there was 2 cars parked behind the Porsche as well. That was kind of surprising. I pictured in my mind this car being standalone, even kind of outside of the house, like outside of these gates that Kid Cudi has. We've seen images of the outside of his house many times. And we just saw, his house kind of as a whole today when we were able to see the garage. So he talked about how his assumption when he arrived on the scene, and by the way, the fire department was already there. He got there a few hours later to investigate. He talked about how his expert opinion was that somebody had cut a hole in the top of the Porsche and then dropped the Molotov cocktail in there. And he said the reason that there wasn't more damage to the car because the car didn't actually explode. It was charred. It was burnt, but the outside was fine. And, a lot of the inside was fine. It was mainly the passenger seat, the console, and the driver's seat. But he said this was because there was a silk scarf used that was put in the bottle in the gasoline. And by the way, the bottle was an Old English malt liquor bottle. So this scarf, by the way, this silk scarf, it looked to be like a designer Hermes type of scarf. So that was also something that I noted. And then he talked about the fingerprints. And this is where I'm getting to the mistrial. So he talked about how DNA was lifted. I'm sorry, not fingerprints. Yes, DNA was lifted. They did have fingerprints, but they only got partial DNA from those on certain pieces of evidence, like the lighter and the bottle, which I'm discussing. And then there was one more thing, the lighter, the bottle, and then the scarf. So they were able to get a partial female DNA sample from the bottle. And while they were talking about testing this evidence, the arson investigator said that they were working with the LAPD to get 2 prints off of the front door from the trespassing incident a month prior. And so they called these cards, they called them evidence cards, or basically, I just had it. Sorry. They called them. Okay. Okay. So they were working with the LAPD to take fingerprints off of Kid Cudi's door from the trespassing incident in December of 2011, and they were going to try to match any of the DNA samples or fingerprints that they could lift off of the arson evidence. And so they talked about how they obtained these print cards, like fingerprint cards from the door from the LAPD, and or they had them in their possession. But somehow in August of 2012, the print cards from the trespassing incident were destroyed. And the government asked Jimenez, did you order those to be destroyed? And he said no. And then, they went on and said, is it unusual that evidence like that would be destroyed? And they kind of went on about this. And there was an objection from the defense after they asked if it was unusual, and it was sustained. And then there was a sidebar, and then we had a break. And then when we came back, that's when the mistrial was brought up, and I'll explain why. So Alexandra Shapiro, one of Diddy's attorneys, brought up the fact that one of the concerns, or something that jurors had brought up during jury selection, and it was discussed in detail, was the fact that Diddy and other celebrities could pay their way out of situations and pay their way out of things. And what they said the government was alluding to was that Diddy paid someone off in the LAPD to destroy evidence or destroy these print cards. And they were alluding to that. It was, they were inferring that. They didn't say it, but they were definitely inferring it. And so she just said, we can't get this out of the jurors' minds right now. And it's, he's not going to have a fair trial because they're just going to be thinking that he tampered with evidence and this and that. And there's no proof. And the government was irresponsible and they were improper in asking these questions and getting these answers. And so, the government's like, that's ridiculous. We absolutely were not improper. And, we understand why, if you want to strike this testimony, etc. Well, the judge essentially denied the mistrial, but he said it was, one of his reasons was because they did not object up until the very last question. He just said, you guys, you just sat there kind of like sitting there and you didn't say anything, and then you objected. So then Alexandra Shapiro was like, okay, well, it would be great if you could tell the jury that the government asked an improper question. So, they should just disregard that and also disregard the answer. And then the government just said, yeah, we're not going to have the judge call us improper because that also wouldn't be fair. So the judge initially just said, don't worry about it. I will tell the jury, I will instruct them to disregard the question and the answer, end of story. And they did. And that's exactly what he said. So that was heated. It got a little spicy for a minute because the government and Shapiro were kind of like, nope. So yeah. And it was the attorney, the prosecutor Slavic who yeah. So essentially, when the defense moved for a mistrial, they said that the government was inferring that Diddy paid someone off, at the LAPD to destroy evidence. And during jury selection, and just a big point of contention within the jury, and they experienced this because jury selection was well over a week, and they said that it came up a lot that people thought that Diddy could pay his way out of things, and as all or any celebrity could pay their way out of things. So Shapiro was like, we can't get this out of their head. This was such a big thing for so many people, and the government knew what they were doing. They were inferring that he's paying people off, and and now he's not going to get a fair trial. And the government was just like, no, just disregard it. We understand. You can disregard that testimony. Like apologies if, they didn't apologize, but they were just kind of backtracking, being like, we didn't infer anything. So Shapiro went on to say, well, okay, if you're not going to grant us a mistrial, because of course the judge denied it, and I'll back up. He denied it because he said that they didn't object until the very last question, which was, do you find it unusual to see evidence destroyed like this, not by your directive? That's what they asked to the arson investigator. And, the questions prior I kind of mentioned were just like, did you authorize this? Did you know it was being destroyed? Stuff like that. And they didn't object. So he just kind of said, you didn't object until the last question, and I sustained it. So sorry. So yes, back to Shapiro. She just said, okay, well, if you won't grant us a mistrial, please instruct the jury that the government, they asked an improper question, and essentially they were being improper. And the government's like, no, I don't think the judge should say that, because that's not really cool. And the government countered with, no, it's not exactly fair for the judge to call us improper. That would just be just prejudice against us. So essentially the judge is like, what I'm going to say is the jury should disregard the testimony or the questioning. And the judge said, okay. And the judge eventually just said, okay, I'm just going to have the jury, I'm going to instruct them to disregard the questions and disregard the answers. And that's exactly what he did. So yeah, that was that. And then when Mark Agnifilo did the cross-examination, it was mainly about the fact that he didn't look into any other evidence in the car, and he specifically meant this black glove that he found or that we saw in the back seat. In the back seat, there is like a glove in the corner in this one picture. And then for the defense cross-examination, which was done by Mark Agnifilo, he focused on a couple things. He really was hyper-focused on this black glove that was found in the back seat of Kid Cudi's car. It was like in the corner. And the investigator, Jimenez, he said, that was his driving glove. And Agnifilo said, well, did you test it for DNA evidence? And he said, no, the owner of the car said it was his to drive. And he said, well, why is it in the back seat? Why is there only one? And it was just like black glove. And I was like, oh, OJ. But I think, his point was that, and he also brought up the fact that Kid Cudi told the investigator to reach out to Capricorn Clark and to Cassie Ventura. And he was kind of saying, oh, well, did you reach out to them after the female partial DNA came back? And he said, no, I don't remember. I really don't remember if it was before or after. It was just because Kid Cudi told us to. He said that he didn't get in touch with Cassie. She didn't answer her phone. He actually got in touch with her dad, who is a firefighter himself. And then with Capricorn Clark, he said that at one point he called her multiple times. Her brother answered and kind of told him to, stop calling. So I think Agnifilo's whole thing was, well, it could have been anybody here. You just didn't talk to them, and you didn't test everything, that you should have. You didn't test all of the evidence that was, around the car. Yeah. So that was pretty much that. Yeah, pretty standard. And then we got to the direct testimony of Deontay Nash, who is Cassie's very close friend and also a celebrity stylist. He worked for Diddy and Cassie from 2008 up until 2018. And he talked a lot about the violence that Cassie experienced at the hands of Diddy and what Deontay himself witnessed, and also what Deontay experienced at the hands of Diddy. And, not to minimize anything, but this testimony was a lot of what we heard before from Carrie Morgan, Cassie's former best friend, from Don Richard. just incidents of Diddy beating Cassie. So I'll go into, a couple of them, maybe two of them, but he said that he heard Diddy call her hoe, bitch, slut. I'm trying not to say it. All these names, awful names, and he said that it would make Cassie cry. He talked about how there was a 2014 Vanity Fair party, which is the Oscars after party. He and Cassie showed up, and Cassie's hair was down and pretty, and Diddy was there, and he kind of like picked up Deontay by his jacket, Deontay described, and said, "Hey, I told you I wanted her hair to be up." And so, he rushes to the bathroom with Cassie. He pins her hair up with somebody else, and then they come back out, and Diddy said, "Oh, I guess it did look better down." So there was that was one thing that he talked about, Diddy kind of getting violent with him. He said at another point, we heard this testimony actually from Cassie, just an incident where Deontay, Mia, who is actually victim 4, who we're going to hear from, she's a Diddy assistant and also Cassie's friend, Deontay, Mia, and Cassie were at her apartment in LA after doing some day drinking or going out, and they were packing for Cassie to go on some music festival thing. It was in Canada somewhere, but Cassie fell asleep on the couch, and I guess Diddy was knocking at the door. Deontay answered, and he kind of pushed through and said, "I told that B to answer her phone," and then he, ripped Cassie off of the couch by her hair and started wailing on her. And at one point, Deontay said he jumped on his back to get Diddy to stop. And then he was thrown off. And then Mia jumped on his back trying to get him to stop. And at that point, Diddy just kept kicking and beating Cassie until she hit the side of her head on a bed frame and she started bleeding everywhere. And then he said Diddy got very nervous. And Deontay said he started to call 911, but he hung up and he doesn't remember why, but he just went and got towels for Cassie. And Diddy sent his bodyguard to get her and take her to a plastic surgeon. So, and again, we had heard this incident before from Cassie. It was very disturbing. And then there was another time, this was a little bit more, I guess, intricate, but I don't know what this fight was about. We're not really sure, but Deontay and Cassie were cooking at her apartment. Diddy kind of busted in and said, "I need to talk to Cassie." He ends up physically pushing her and saying, "Get the F out of his apartment." I guess he paid for that apartment. And then he did the same thing to Deontay, pushed him and kind of slapped him upside the head. Now, Cassie and Diddy are still fighting. And Deontay says, I'm leaving after he kind of got pushed. So he goes down to the valet to get his car, and Diddy's security is there. And he's like, okay, this is kind of weird. And he said, Cassie and Diddy come down. He said, Cassie's crying. And they finally get in his car, and Diddy's just talking crap to them, saying, you broke asses, like, get out of here, whatever. So they drive off, Cassie and Deontay, and then Diddy calls Cassie. He says, pull over. They do. And then he comes up to the car, where they are. They weren't very far. And he starts saying things to Cassie, like, if you don't do XYZ, which again, I still don't exactly know what that is. He said, I'll release the sex tapes that I have of you. And he said, I'll release them to your parents' work. And, your brother's a B, and like, he's the only one that would ever protect her. And so at that point, he finally leaves the car and they drive, and Cassie's crying. And Deontay says, why don't I just drop you here on Sunset so you can get a taxi and go to a hotel that's safer? So she does. He goes home. She goes to the La Montrose Hotel. Well, Diddy shows up with his bodyguards at Deontay's house, and Deontay said he starts looking everywhere for Cassie. And by the way, Deontay was kind of a sassy witness. They'd be like, how are you, sir? And Deontay would be like, blessed, like on the stand. It was kind of funny. But he said, Diddy was looking for her everywhere. He goes, he looked in my oven, and I don't know why. So then he took Deontay's phone, and Deontay was getting a call from the La Montrose Hotel, and Diddy's like, oh, okay, cool. She's there. Let's go there. So they go to the La Montrose Hotel, and Diddy takes Deontay's phone and says, go get her. She'll come down with you. And apparently Deontay said he got Cassie's room number from the front desk, which I thought was odd, but he did. And he goes up with a bodyguard, and Cassie kind of jumped when they were able to get in the door. And they said, Diddy's looking for you. And he said that he said that she said that she was basically going to go over the balcony. Those were his words. She went to the balcony and said she was going to go over, which, you can interpret however you want. But then the bodyguard, D-Rock, I believe, said, we'll take you out the side entrance. So they do. Deontay goes downstairs. And by the way, D-Rock is one of Diddy's main bodyguards. So Deontay goes down to the lobby and says, sorry to Diddy, she left. Diddy's kind of mad, but he's like, whatever. So Deontay says he leaves, but he goes to a hotel. He did not feel safe going home. And he said when he did get home the next day, his backpack was stolen, which had $1,000 cash, his ID, his laptop, or his iPad. And he said he kept that cash for him or for Cassie in case of emergency. So if they had to go to a hotel, they wouldn't have to use their name, which I was like, oh my goodness. He also discussed an incident in Vegas where he witnessed an escort knock on the door to their room. They were on the same floor. Also said Cassie didn't want to go out that night, but Diddy kind of forced her to. He talked about Cassie's 29th birthday, where she was forced to do an FO on her birthday and said she didn't want to. And he also testified that she told him she didn't want to do these FOs, but she did it for Diddy because he wanted her to. And then there was a lot of talk about Cassie's music career and how Diddy would control it. And with this mixtape that she did, it was out for free. And Diddy said, okay, if the downloads are good, we'll put it out there for money for, where people can actually pay for it, etc. And he said that never happened. And let me see. Yeah, it was a lot of similar testimony to her other friends about her drug use, how she was very addicted to pills, as was Diddy. And also he said that he didn't hate Diddy. He was asked, how do you feel about the defendant? And he's like, I don't hate him. And he admitted that he still texted with Diddy after he stopped working for him in 2018, which was also when Cassie and Diddy broke up. And Cassie and Deontay are still very close. He made that very clear. Now, during cross-examination with Xavier Donaldson, and we are not finished, by the way, I feel like I'll get into more detail tomorrow because it was tough to see where this cross was going. It was a lot of like, hey, you said that you didn't really want to be here to testify, Deontay. You got subpoenaed. The government forced you. And he's like, yeah. And then it was like, well, why did you bring your lawyer to meet with the government? You said you didn't have any plans to make any demands of Mr. Combs or to sue Mr. Combs civilly. And he's like, no, I don't. And Donaldson was just like, okay, let me give you this transcript. Does this refresh your memory or give you something? It was, we couldn't see it as in the courtroom, but he's reading it and he's like, nope, I still don't remember considering ever suing him. And then he was asked about some meetings he had with the government, and he was high for one of them, I guess. And Maureen Comey, the prosecutor's like, okay, we'll stop the meeting early. He also, Donaldson brought up that, your career started at Bad Boy. You were an intern and now you're like this big celebrity stylist. Like, would you say Diddy is responsible for launching your career? And he said yes. He was also asked about, because he talked a lot about music and Cassie's music career. He's kind of like, okay, well, how do you know music so well? You're a stylist. And I don't know if anyone picked up on that. I definitely did. And as I said, he was just a sassy witness. I mean, at one point, Donaldson asked him about Cassie. I think he said Ms. Ventura, and he's like, Mrs. Fine. It was a moment. It was a funny moment. But yeah, I'll get into more of the cross tomorrow because I think it's just going to be wrapped up with a bow. But that was pretty much the extent of what happened today. And I hope that I was clear for everybody. We are on day 12, week 3 of the United States versus Sean Combs, the federal trial. And we kick things off this morning by finishing the cross-examination of Deontay Nash, who is Cassie's very close friend, was her former stylist and Diddy's former stylist. And he was cross-examined by Diddy's attorney, Xavier Donaldson. And right off the bat, I have to say that Deontay seemed to bring this lightness to the courtroom. I mean, it's been very dark. Things that we are hearing are really tough to listen to. And Deontay Nash seemed to have the judge even smiling at one point. I mean, that quickly kind of turned into like, okay, you guys need to get it together. Let's move along. And let me think. Oh, also, I was able to read Diddy's lips today when he turned around and saw his mother enter the courtroom. He turned around, he blew her a kiss, and he said, "How you doing, mommy?" I'm certain he said that. I read his lips. He also smiled and nodded when his three sons walked in. They walked in around 10:15. Christian, Justin, and Quincy. And yeah, he seemed to be in good spirits until we got to the testimony of Mia, his former assistant. And Mia is a pseudonym. She's victim 4, but I'll get to Mia later. But I wanted to just point out that I had never seen him, shake his head no at any testimony of anybody so far. And, there's a chance I might have missed it, of course, but I saw him shake his head yes at some former assistant testimony. Like, he was even laughing with, I think it was David James, that assistant, when he was on the stand. David James had said something about being at a party and kind of dancing. He called it Diddy bopping, and Diddy's like, yeah. But back to Mia. Mia said a couple things. One of them, she said he sexually assaulted her, and he just was like, looked down like that. And I was like, oh, wow. I have never seen him kind of just shake his head and almost deny something. But we'll get to Mia. So let's go back to Deontay Nash really quick. He finished his cross-examination, I would say, within the hour, and he was questioning his testimony. And this is the testimony in particular of Cassie's eye gash incident, where Deontay said Diddy busted in her apartment. He jumped on Diddy's back, to stop him from hurting Cassie, as did the other friend, who, by the way, was Mia. And he testified, Deontay, during direct, that when Cassie was on the ground and her head was already kind of split open and bleeding, that Diddy continued to kick her and punch her and beat her. And Donaldson pointed out that Deontay had quite a few meetings with the government. I think he listed like 5 or 6. And he said, well, in all of your meetings with the government, you never said anything about Diddy kicking Cassie when she was already bleeding and down on the ground. Why is that? You never said it. And his answer was that he only answered what he was asked. And I thought about, okay, well, he told us a few times he didn't really want to be there. He was subpoenaed, and he just kind of wanted to be in and out of all these meetings, so much so that he was even high for one of them. They also questioned something else that he talked about during his direct testimony, Cassie's 29th birthday. They were at a restaurant. Diddy set up this surprise party for her, and then they went to a karaoke bar after. And Deontay had said that Diddy, it seemed like they were fighting because Diddy wanted to do a freak off. And as many of us know, Cassie was forced to do a freak off on her 29th birthday. But Deontay said that he overheard Diddy say to Cassie, I do so much for you. Why can't you do this one thing for me? And then he also said at the other location they went to after the restaurant, the karaoke bar, he saw Diddy's like finger in Cassie's face in a corner. And then again, Donaldson brought up the fact, like, well, why is that you met with the government X many times, and these 2 instances were not mentioned? They seem to be pretty important to the night. Why would you not mention these? And he had the same answer. I only answer what I'm asked, type of thing. He also brought up text messages that Deontay sent to Diddy well after he stopped working for him. And again, after all the violence he endured, etc. There was an "I love you, brother" text. There was also a text exchange between them in 2019 where Diddy seems to be asking about Cassie and her well-being. And then there was another text from Deontay to Diddy in 2020 about a party, like, how do I get invited to this party, which Deontay said was actually for a friend and not really for him. And then I wanted to go back to something that I think that I've tied together through what Donaldson was trying to do with some of his cross. But essentially, when there was the hotel incident, when Cassie was up in this room and he said she wanted to like go over the balcony to escape Diddy, and the security guard kind of said, okay, I'll take you through the side, don't worry. And Deontay went downstairs and kind of told Diddy she wasn't there. And then his backpack got stolen. I think, because what I noticed today, I think the reason they kind of highlighted the part about the security guard kind of escorting Cassie out, they kind of touched on that as well today. I think they were trying to say, well, for a RICO charge, you have to have all of these employees really helping you with your criminal enterprise. And if these employees were helping Cassie, how could they, help with this criminal enterprise with Diddy? Maybe not, but that's what I took from him bringing this up about the security guards kind of helping her. And we also heard about a security guard breaking up a fight between Diddy and Cassie, or I shouldn't say a fight, I should say an almost beat down of Cassie by Diddy, with a security guard breaking it up. And Mia testified about that. That was kind of a mouthful. Sorry if that didn't make sense, but that's what I've kind of gathered, is that they're trying to highlight the fact that, security didn't always do what Diddy said. But anyway, that was the extent of the cross-examination by Deontay Nash, except for what kind of brought the courtroom erupting in laughter, I guess. And that was the, I guess, the extent of what would be important during his cross-examination about, and that would be the extent of what's notable about his cross-examination and kind of being called out for certain things. Now, there was a certain point where Donaldson basically said, and then Donaldson made some comments to him, you and Cassie are so close, but she kept secrets from you. You have text messages where she's talking about a secret trip and you didn't know about this trip. And also he would point out, well, you said Cassie didn't want to do freak offs, but you saw this escort leave their room in Vegas. And directly after Vegas, when you said she didn't want to do this freak off and she's so upset, she and Diddy go to Mexico on a vacation, and she's texting Deontay from Mexico saying what a great time she has and how nice it is, or a great time she's having and how nice the hotel is and everything. So pointed that out. And then going back to the secrets, he brought up Kid Cudi and how Cassie didn't really disclose that she was dating him, and then disclosed, oh, did you know she was dating an NBA player by the name of Brandon? They just said a name, Brandon. Could be a last name or first name. I don't know sports. I haven't dug into it yet. And then she said, oh, did you know she was in a relationship with Andre Branch, who's in the NFL? Nobody knew that. So that was kind of interesting. And then there was a moment where Donaldson was leading up to, I believe he was, and listen, we all know. And then there was another point where Donaldson was questioning Deontay about Cassie's 2015 trip to South Africa. And this had been brought up early on in Cassie's direct testimony. But when she was in South Africa in 2015, she and Diddy were on again, off again, and she was talking to Michael B. Jordan. This came up during direct. So Donaldson is kind of setting the foundation to bring up Michael B. Jordan because he's talking about South Africa to Deontay. And all of a sudden, Deontay just goes, Mr. Donaldson, I know where you're going with this. I'm going to stop you. Yes, I hooked Cassie up with Michael B. Jordan. And, Mia kind of made it happen because she made sure that Michael B. Jordan had Cassie's number and vice versa. And everybody was like, what just happened? Because, you don't do that in court. And then he went on and he's like, look, Diddy was at this music festival with Gina. Gina is a woman that has come up very frequently that Diddy was kind of dating on and off, and Cassie did not like that. And apparently, when Cassie was in South Africa, somebody thought Diddy and Gina, they thought Gina was Cassie. So they sent a picture or something like that to Cassie. Again, it was kind of hard to follow, but this is what I took from it. This photo was sent to Cassie because somebody thought that it was her. And Cassie was very embarrassed. Deontay said this would embarrass Cassie. She thought she would look bad because Diddy was kind of running around on her. So they were like, screw it. let's live. And she started talking to Michael B. Jordan. But yeah, that was a moment. So that was the extent of Deontay's cross. And like I said, it did seem to bring some light into the dark. But then we went to Mia. And Mia is Sean Combs's former personal assistant and also was his former director of development at Revolt TV, which is different than Revolt Films, but clearly a subsidiary. Now, Mia also testified that she was best friends with Cassie and they are still best friends or very good friends. And she said at one point they were almost like sisters. She talked about how she was a personal assistant for Mike Myers before Diddy. And it was interesting because during jury selection, Mike Myers' name was brought up to the jury. And everybody was like, why? What is the meaning of this? What does Mike Myers have to do with Diddy? Well, I believe this is it. And she also said that working for Mike Myers, her hours were 10 to 6. She would occasionally get a call on the weekend to watch his dog or something. But working for Diddy was a shell shock because her first day on the job, she said she got to the office after she got hired and they sent her to New Jersey to his house to do some inventory or something. She gets back to the office in Manhattan. It's maybe 10 p.m. by the time she's about to leave. And they said, Mr. Combs wants you in the studio. So she goes to the studio maybe by 10:30. And then she testified that she didn't leave until 1 p.m. the very next day. And she said she thought it was, I'm new, I'm kind of on trial. Maybe that's what it is. But then she testified that she once was up for 5 days straight. And she used time-released Adderall to help her get through this. But she finally, her body just broke down on her and she had a nervous breakdown. Her vision got blurred. She lost her equilibrium. She just said she started crying uncontrollably. And then Diddy finally sent her home. And when the government asked her, and this is very much at the beginning of the questioning, they weren't getting into details, but they said, has he been physical with you? Has he been violent with you? And she said, yes, he's thrown me into pools. He's pushed me. He's thrown things at me and he sexually assaulted me. That's when Diddy was like, he kind of shook his head like that. So getting into her direct testimony, she corroborated a lot of the violence that Cassie had experienced. I mean, she talked about 2 incidents in Turks and Caicos where Cassie came running into her room, screaming, saying, you have to help me. He's going to kill me. They barricaded the door with furniture. Then they ran outside. And then she said she had a vision of them like paddling on a paddleboard when it was nighttime and not really safe. And Diddy was kind of screaming at them from the beach. She talked about how she witnessed, or actually she talked about an audio recording that she heard that Cassie took of Diddy slapping her around and Cassie crying and telling him to stop. She corroborated a story that Cassie told at the Cannes Film Festival or something that happened at the Cannes Film Festival where Diddy got upset with her. And Cassie said he dug his hand in her beaded dress very hard and was kind of like clenching his teeth talking to her, which Mia testified as well, but said that he dug his fingernails into her arm. And then we were shown bruises on Cassie when she was on a red carpet that were covered up. And Mia corroborated this, and we also had Cassie testify about these same bruises as well. She also discussed a time that she was forced to do drugs with Sean Combs. It was ketamine. She said they were on a tour bus and he put out 3 plates in front of her and some other people with white powder on all 3 plates. And it seemed to be some kind of game. Like, what will you get? Cocaine, Molly, or ketamine? And she didn't want to do it. And so she pretended to do it. And he got upset and he kind of got in her face. And then he like pushed some white powder aside for her and forced her to do it. And she said she tried to, snot it out. It didn't work. She talked about there was an instance where he threw a bowl of spaghetti at her at like 3 a.m. in front of party guests at his house after they came back from a club and he told her to go get IHOP and she ran to go like change her tampon. She said they had been going at it like from 8 a.m. straight and she was exhausted. She had her period. and he started screaming at her, and she couldn't say, I'm just trying to change my tampon. And she said she had blood running down her leg, and she was just like, forget it. And she went to her room, and he threw this bowl of spaghetti at her. And she got a call from HR the next day that she was suspended without pay for being insubordinate. And this actually happened another time when she testified that Diddy told her to take Cassie to a hotel to keep her away from his house. He claimed he was going to hang out with his children. Who knows if he was going to do something else, but they decided to go to a Prince party, or a party Prince was throwing. They got this call, and Mia said they were at this hotel and they were like kind of discussing, like teenagers, like, should we sneak out of the house or not? They decided to do it. They get to this party. She says it's so fun. Prince was performing like on a table to a small group of people. They were dancing on purple plexiglass. And then Mia says that she saw Diddy walk in with like a bucket hat, and he made eyes with her. And then she said she looked over and Cassie just booked it. And they ran outside, and she said that Diddy, caught up with Cassie and tackled her, but his security pulled her off. And then Mia said the next day she got suspended without pay for being insubordinate for this. And she also testified, just really quick, corroborating the cleanup of hotel rooms after Diddy would do these hotel stays. She'd clean up baby oil that was on the wall, on the table, on the floor. She said one time she had to drop something off at a hotel, and Cassie answered the door in a blue wig and kind of like peeked out. And she said that it was just so off-putting that she's like, are you okay? Because Cassie's demeanor was so weird. And she said that Cassie's like, yeah, I'm fine, and shut the door. And then she also testified that when she was with Cassie driving, Cassie got a text message from Diddy, and it was talking about doing a freak off, and that Cassie had a physical reaction to it. She immediately got a very bad stomach ache and had awful stomach pains because she was so upset over this. Now, we also learned about a time that Diddy threw a computer at Mia because the Wi-Fi wasn't working on a movie set that he was at, and Mia couldn't fix it. And she testified that Swizz Beatz was there. I don't know if he was on the set or present when the computer was thrown, but she did say he was there. She also testified about a time that Diddy slammed her arm in a bathroom door at the Revolt TV office when he kind of stole her phone and she wanted it back. She didn't get it back for hours. And then she testified that he sexually assaulted her. And this happened when, at first she testified that there was an instance where it was his 40th birthday. He gave her shots to take. And I don't know if the government was inferring there was something in these shots, but she kind of said, they said, how did you feel after taking these shots? And she said, I felt weird. They hit me hard. And they said, was that normal for you? And she said, well, I was in my 20s and I was in New York City, maybe meaning I drank a lot. So no, it wouldn't be normal for me to feel what I felt. But then she testified that Diddy kind of put her against a wall, kissed her, and put his hand up her dress. And then she said when she came to, she was fully clothed, but on a chair in the living room. So they left it at that. And then the other two times, one was a few months later at his LA home where she was sleeping in a bunk bed on the bottom bunk, and he came on top of her and forced himself inside her. And they asked, how did it end? And she said she doesn't know how it ended, but he wouldn't leave a job unfinished. And then she testified about another time that he forced himself inside her mouth when she was unpacking in his closet. And it was emotional. And I have to say, Mia was looking down for a lot of this testimony because she's using a pseudonym. I don't think she really wants her face to be shown, but she's very soft-spoken. She cried a lot and she takes a lot of pauses. And it's heartbreaking. And it's also hard to hear her. So I did compare some notes with other people after, which was helpful, but I'll go into more detail tomorrow because she will be finishing her direct testimony and also her cross-examination. So if I left anything out, I will discuss it then. And we just finished day 13, week 3 of the United States versus Sean Combs. And today we finished the direct testimony of former assistant and director of development of Revolt TV, Mia, who is going by a pseudonym. She also is very close with Cassie to this day, described the two of them like sisters. So just to finish off her direct testimony this morning, Mia talked about an incident that occurred in South Africa when Cassie and Diddy were on again, off again, and she started to date Michael B. Jordan. Many of you know about this, but we heard from Mia about what she experienced during this whole ordeal, which was Diddy very irate over in the United States, trying to get a hold of Cassie when he found out that she was upset about this video or picture of he and Gina that surfaced because they were at this music festival. I think I detailed a little bit of that in the last video. And Cassie started talking to Michael B. Jordan. So Diddy's very irate and he's calling Cassie. She answered maybe once or twice, but then she kind of stopped answering him. She may have blocked him. And then Diddy starts calling Mia. And not only that, but when Mia wouldn't answer because she said that she was sleeping, I mean, she testified that she would wake up to 40 missed calls sometimes. She started getting calls from Christina Coram, who was his chief of staff. And Christina Coram was like, you need to call him. You need to figure this out. Like, you could kind of tell that Coram was in a weird spot too, that maybe Diddy was breathing down her neck. So she felt strange. But Mia testified that, again, she'd be sleeping. She'd wake up to so many missed calls. And we saw these WhatsApp messages from her to Christina and also emails between Mia and Diddy, where she's like, I'm not ignoring you. You're calling when I'm sleeping. I didn't hear it. And she also said, she testified she felt like she was in this really tough situation because when she didn't answer Diddy's phone call, he'd say, forget it. We're through. We're over. Essentially, like, you're not going to work here anymore. And then finally, she got a text message from him. I think it was pretty close to when she was supposed to leave South Africa. But he texted her and he said that, okay, I have it all written down. He said, call me now, F it all. I'ma tell everything. And when he said, I'm going to tell everything, Mia said she took that as he was going to tell about their sexual encounters, which Mia has said these encounters were actually sexual assaults, and Diddy has now claimed that they are consensual through his defense attorney during cross-examination. So he said, call me now, F it all, I'm gonna tell everything, don't speak to me, F her, meaning Cassie. And then he said, F ABC and all the lawyers, let's go to war. We were wondering what that meant, and Mia clarified that Revolt TV that she was a part of, she had just sold a comedic script to ABC, and it was kind of a big deal, and they signed a contract. There was a press release, and she was very excited and proud of this, and Diddy threatened to take it away if she didn't call. So we heard about this incident, and then we heard about another incident. I mean, we heard about a bunch where basically he would scream at her, demean her, humiliate her about something so trivial, like she didn't put out the right workout outfits that he wanted on one occasion, and he freaked out at her and she tried to explain, and then he suspended her without pay for 5 days. We actually saw that email. And then the other thing that I thought was a pretty big deal today, at the end of the direct examination, Mia testified that in 2023, November of 2023, about maybe a week or a few days after Cassie's civil suit dropped, she got a text from D-Rock, who is one of Diddy's security guards or security. And she said that she wasn't sure that he still worked for Diddy. She said she was pretty sure he went off on his own. He had a clothing company he was working on, but she was excited to hear from him. And he just said, hey, Mia, what's up? And she wrote back. And by the way, all of her texts, she seems very sweet. She uses a lot of emojis, exclamation points. And she just said, hey, D-Rock, like, I'm so excited to see you, with like lots of O's, or hear from you with lots of exclamation points. And then he wrote, it's so crazy what's going on with Puff. And he said, he and Cassie just fought like a regular couple or like any other couple. And then Mia said that she's like, okay, something's wrong here. I feel like something is not right, because D-Rock witnessed everything that I witnessed and even stepped in to help Cassie at certain points. So why would he be saying this? And then she said something back. I don't know. It was kind of, throwaway. And she kind of said, where are you? And then she said she panicked when he said, oh, I just landed in Miami. I'm helping one of Puffy's kids with something. And I'm sorry, I refer to him as Diddy, Puffy, Sean Combs. Hopefully you guys know who I'm talking about by now. So she didn't answer. And then he kind of wrote back again and said, Diddy wants to talk to you. And she's like, okay. And then she described that when Diddy called her, she had this reaction where she threw her phone on the couch and ran out of her apartment. She was just so disturbed. So D-Rock hit her up again. She didn't respond. And then he texted her again, kind of annoyed, being like, Mia, I can't believe you're blowing me off like this. So she finally wrote back and said, I called Diddy back because he called me. I missed his call. I didn't hear my phone. You could tell what she was doing. I felt kind of bad for her. And she said, I called him back, but he didn't answer. So I left it at that. And then she testified she didn't actually call him back. She wanted nothing to do with anything. And that was that for now, until a few days later, she gets a text from D-Rock that said, how can I send you a gift? And she testified when asked by the government, what did you think was this gift? What do you think he meant by this? And she said, money. And then she said she wrote back and said, no, I'm good. I am in debt, but I'm good. I don't want your money. Or she didn't say money. I don't need a gift. I don't need anything. And D-Rock said back to her, why can't I just send my sister a gift? She testified that they refer to themselves as brother and sister, like one big family, which also comes up with the defense a lot as well. Oh, you're one big family. You all loved each other. Puff created this family environment. So after that text where she kind of said, no, thank you, D-Rock didn't reach out to her again. But a few months later, in February of 2024, she gets a text from Diddy. The first text just said, hey, Mia, can we talk? Can we catch up? Love. That was it. She didn't respond. And then about 5 days later, he texted again and he said, look, you were my right hand for a really long time, 2009, by the way, to 2017. And he said, I just need you to jog my memory a bit. And then he wrote, I need to be, and this part I'm paraphrasing because I couldn't write it fast enough, but he said, I need to be reminded of who was around me during a specific time period. And then he said, I hope you're well, blah, 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 love. And that was it. She never heard from him again. And I thought that was pretty big, specifically the D-Rock text and the Diddy text. I think they're really trying to tie this with the RICO charge on the indictment. So that's pretty much how the direct testimony ended. Oh, it ended with some pretty big announcement by Mia when asked where she works now. And she said, I don't work. And they asked why. And she said, because I have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress in the work environment because of what I dealt with at the hands of Sean Combs. So that is specifically how they ended things. Now, Brian Steele did the cross-examination and he really focused on a couple things. Well, first of all, the defense handed the jury binders, and in the binders, they had the exhibits that he put up on the screen for the first half of the morning. And then the second half, there was a binder that there's two binders they handed out to the jurors to share. And in that binder was a scrapbook that Mia had made for Diddy's 45th birthday. So I'll get into that. But we first saw a series of Instagram photos that Mia had on her personal Instagram page from, let's say, 2013 up until 2016. And one of the big points that Steele kept hammering was Mia's birthday posts to Diddy. Whenever it was his birthday, she would do these elaborate birthday posts saying how much she loved him, and not just on his birthday. She seemed like a very loving person. I mentioned that. She's always saying, love you. And all her posts would be like, he's so inspirational. You're the most inspirational man. I'm so lucky to have you. But the birthday posts were important because she testified that that was the first time on his 40th birthday in 2009 that he sexually assaulted her, put her up against a wall, kissed her, and touched her, and then inferred that she was drugged. And this also came up with Brian Steele because she talked about, not really remembering certain things, which again inferred that she was drugged. So Steele would ask, like, you're saying all these loving things to this man who traumatized you for the first time 5 years earlier, let's say, on this day, his birthday, November 4th. So, why are you said you couldn't get this out of your mind. It was so traumatizing. Why are you doing these elaborate birthday posts on a day that traumatized you? And, Mia would say things, she seemed like she was very informed because she did talk a lot about her therapist, and she would answer questions like that. And she would say, a victim advocate would know why I did that. Or she would say, I'm not a therapist or a doctor, but there's a reason that abuse survivors do things like this. And she used the term survivors, and she would say, I'm not a doctor. So yeah, he really hammered on that. Why did you say he's so wonderful on this specific day when it was so traumatizing to you? And then he asked her point blank, like, didn't you say that, he drugged you and assaulted you? And she's like, I never used the word drugged. And then Steele, and she didn't. And Steele went into the whole, well, you did say that alcohol wouldn't affect you a certain way when you came to, like, what did you mean by that? And then she said, well, yeah, I guess it's a possibility that he did drug me. So she brought that up. And she also talked about, and this was something indirect that I just left out. She also spoke about getting a settlement from Diddy when she left the company, the Revolt Film Company and Bad Boy, in 2017 because Diddy wanted to get rid of Revolt TV. He wasn't into it. And she said that she hired an employment lawyer to collect severance, maybe some things she was owed on past projects. And Diddy was like, I'm so betrayed. You betrayed me by hiring a lawyer. And she was like, your company told me to. Like, Bad Boy execs told me to, and she was awarded $400,000, but she said she only got $200,000 of it because the other half went to her lawyers. Okay. So again, many Instagram posts. We actually saw a post of Meek Mill, The Game, Cassie, Diddy, and some other people in a hot tub with bikinis on, and so we saw that, and we saw just a loving post or a loving caption towards Diddy about how much fun they all have. And she would say, yeah, the highs were high and the lows were low. We also saw, when I talked about the other day, if you're watching all these videos, the plates with the drugs on them, the white powder that I said was on a tour bus, that was a tour bus that they had at Burning Man. And so she testified that was a horrible experience for her at Burning Man because he forced her to do drugs. Well, the defense showed us a picture from them multiple years at Burning Man where she would caption how much fun it was, and she would say, take me back, etc. And they would say, why would you do that when you were so traumatized? And I thought she had a good answer. She said, at this point in time, Instagram was a place where people really lied about their life. You wanted everyone to think how great your life was, which is true. I mean, now I feel like people are being more honest and open on Instagram when they have problems. But she's totally right. In 2013, you're not about to be like, my life is, it was different. I thought that was solid. But, so yeah, we saw a picture of one specific birthday post that Steele pointed out where Diddy was dressed in like some kind of costume, and he was kind of grabbing his groin, and Steele was kind of like, you picked out a picture of your abuser holding his groin like that. Why would you do that? I feel like I saw a juror, a woman, kind of smirk a little bit at that. It could have been the face she was making. I watched her throughout the afternoon after that smirk, or so I thought. And she kind of just had that face on the whole time. So I'm going to watch her again next week to see if she continues But the other jurors during all of this, the cross-examination specifically with all of these photos, they were looking at them pretty intently. One guy looked a little perplexed, but that's really all I could gather from them. Then we got to the scrapbook, which essentially was uh, Mia put together articles, magazine articles, and this really nice cover note for Diddy for his 45th birthday. The articles were from 1991 to 1999. And the reason that the jurors were given like a scrapbook and this wasn't admitted into evidence officially was because the government is still kind of arguing that they don't need to see everything in the scrapbook because there are articles relating to Biggie's murder where there was a quote where Diddy said something along the lines of, the feds aren't investigating his murder. They're looking at us for other things. And so they're like, we don't want that into evidence, but it's fair that the jury should see the scrapbook because the defense is trying to show that Mia truly cared about Diddy. And that's why she did something like this, which looked very detailed and nice and kind. And so again, when asked, why would you do something like this for this man who you say ruined your life, traumatized you? And she's like, it's just, I'm a nice person. I'm a people pleaser. This is what trauma does. So she had a lot of answers like that. And then I feel like this was just a moment out of nowhere. The sexual assaults came up, and out of nowhere, really, Steele seemed to kind of jump or get a little bit louder at her. And he just said something like, well, isn't it true that you lied and that this was consensual? Those were consensual. And she was very taken aback. And she just said, excuse me, no, I have never lied. And she said something about, she said that something about being a sexual assault survivor. That was part of her answer. And Brian Steele said, well, what if you weren't sexually assaulted or something like that? And it was like, objection. It was kind of a big deal. So he toned it down after that, but it seemed very clear that Diddy believed this was consensual based on his multiple head shakes yesterday and today when this came up. And Mia is very certain that every time that she was with Diddy sexually, she did not want to be. And she also testified that there were, quote, so many times that this happened that she couldn't really remember, again, alluding to possibly being drugged. But that was the extent of the cross today, and we'll finish her cross on Monday. And we don't have a witness list, but I will be sure to tell you who the upcoming witnesses are on Monday, because we usually get some answers by then at the end of the day. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, or not enjoyed, that's probably the wrong word. I hope this was informative for you, the Daily Diddy Digest, and I hope that everybody has a really great weekend.
Okay, and that is it for week 3, the recap. I hope you guys didn't mind the format of this week. It was just so much easier on me. I was able to have part of my weekend as I was spending a lot of extra time putting a recap together for the week. So hopefully, again, you don't mind the likes and ums and knows, because these updates that I do during the week are not scripted, and I was scripting the podcast that I was doing every Sunday. So anyway, I will be back next week with a recap of week 4 and pretty much until the end of the trial. So I hope you all enjoy listening. I guess enjoy is not really the right word, as I've said before, but it just comes naturally for me to say it. But if you want real-time updates, head to Pop Crime TV on YouTube, Lauren Conlin 4 on TikTok, or Conlin_Lauren on X. All right, guys, have a great week, and thanks for listening.